So I was at an industry event last week and the topic of organic growth kept coming up. That will be of no surprise to the many of you who have been to conferences recently or are following the industry trade headlines. Organic growth is a hot topic. And with a mix of curiosity, excitement, fatigue, and frustration, everyone wants to know how to improve organic growth. Because here's what everyone knows, but no one really wants to say: delivering great service isn't enough anymore. Most firms in this industry do provide excellent client experiences. They care deeply about their clients. They work incredibly hard. But somewhere between good and extraordinary lies a chasm that separates the firms growing at 5% from the ones growing at 50%. As you've heard me say many times, I've spent years trying to understand what lives in that gap, and what I've discovered is both simple and profound. It's not always about doing different things. It's oftentimes about how you do the right things better, which brings me to today's episode. Kayne Anderson Rudnick has grown from $10 billion to $64 billion in assets over the past decade. Every single dollar of that growth, organic, no acquisitions, no shortcuts, just pure, sustainable growth driven by something the industry desperately needs to rediscover: authentic relationships and uncompromising quality. But here's what fascinated me most when I sat down with their team. When other firms say we're not a sales culture, it usually means they have no growth strategy. When Kayne Anderson Rudnick says it, they mean something entirely different. They've built a culture so compelling, so aligned with their client values, that business development happens organically. Their clients describe their advisors using the exact same words their employees use to describe the company culture. That's not an accident. That's intentional design. Stephen Rigali told me a story that caught my attention. He said his chief operating officer walked into his office one day and declared, "A's only going forward. I don't care how long it takes to find people." During explosive growth, they'd rather leave positions empty for 2 years than compromise on talent. That's either insane or brilliant, and their results suggest it's brilliant. I'm Meg Carpenter, and Growth Leaders Podcast tells the story of advisory firm founders driving differentiated growth. Today, I'm talking with Stephen Rigali, Executive Managing Director, Jeannine Vanian, Chief Operating Officer, and Stephanie Gillman, Managing Director of Marketing and Communications. This conversation matters because while the rest of our industry struggles with organic growth, these three and the entire team at Kayne Anderson Rudnick have cracked the code on something much more valuable: sustainable, authentic growth that compounds over decades. If you're tired of fighting for scraps in an increasingly commoditized market, this episode will show you there's a different way forward. Here we go. It's rare to find an investment and wealth manager today celebrating 40 years of business, and rarer still to find a legacy firm that has achieved growth with zero M&A, and seemingly impossible to believe that a firm could achieve 540% overall growth from $10 billion to $64 billion in just the last decade. But this is Kayne Anderson Rudnick's story. In 1984, John Anderson, Rick Kayne, and Alan Rudnick established KAR as an extension of John's family office, which still exists to this day. You might have heard John Anderson's name before, as he is the namesake of UCLA's eminent graduate business school. Over 3 decades, the firm continued to grow, and the founders eventually passed the baton to a 3-person executive team instead of a traditional CEO. The current team is Executive Managing Director Steve Rigali, Chief Operating Officer Jeannine Vanian, and Chief Investment Officer Craig Stone. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of sitting down with Steve, Jeannine, and Stephanie Gillman, the Managing Director of Marketing and Communications. In this conversation, we dive deep into how KAR has achieved such outstanding growth, particularly in the last decade, as so many other firms have struggled to find the same success organically. What I learned is that the seeds of success were planted at founding. Here's Steve on the beginning of Kayne Anderson Rudnick.
John had an interesting career. He had a law degree, an accounting degree. He was the managing partner of a very large law firm, but his career evolved over time that he established his family office, and the main activity of that family office was the acquisition of a burgeoning group of privately held companies across many different industries. Rick Kayne and Alan Rudnick had more traditional financial services backgrounds as research analysts, portfolio managers. They're successful in running their own firms. And the three of them came together to establish Kayne Anderson Rudnick and use their own capital to start the business and eventually build out an investment management and a wealth advisory business. And the idea about the origins of the investment philosophy really came from the success that John had in acquiring private companies. And they wanted to take the key things that John thought about when acquiring a business and apply that to the public markets. And that resulted in an investment philosophy that's, a quality approach, which we continue to utilize today. It's evolved, it's been refined, it's received input from many different people, including the people who are the portfolio managers today. But that was really the origins of the firm. And what's interesting is that the firm was established first as an investment management firm.
Right.
And then the wealth advisory business grew out of really the starting of founder capital and then friends and family capital. And over time, we turned around and we had $1 billion worth of clients' money. And as Jeannine and I started to become more involved at a management level of the firm, we sat down and said, really, this is a separate activity from our investment management activities, and we need to think through how to build a business out of this. And so today we're, advising roughly 1,800 families, roughly $9 billion in assets under management. The firm has grown, changed, evolved over the years, but John, along with Rick and Alan, drilled into Jeannine and me. We're the second generation, right? So we got schooled on, the things that were important to them from a cultural standpoint, and we feel very responsible for continuing that on to the next generation.
What were some of those things that they drilled into you early on?
We call it today our core values, but number one, it was always do the right thing, and that's something that we practice every day. Respect each other, work collaboratively, empower each other. Always have the client first, and so I think although as Steve said, we've evolved and grown and changed over the years, but our core values are still true to when we started the firm, I guess, for as long as we've been here. I've been here 35 years, Steve, 34 years. So,
and you worked with Alan.
Yes. When I joined in 89, 90, we, at that point, had about 40 million in AUM with Alan. And some of it was private wealth assets, as Steve said, high net worth families. And I have to say, I think we still have one of those clients with us today. Oh, wow. And so that's the core values are something we're very protective of because it's important for our culture. And we still have them.
So I'm curious to ask, do you think the founders of the business ever dreamt that one day it would be a $60+ billion investment management and wealth advisory business?
I think they are very proud of that. I know because I'm still very much Alan Rudnick comes into the office, still refers clients to us. And I know when we meet with them, when we've met with them, they've said they're very, very, very proud and happy about where we are. And I think every single time we thank them for setting the foundation for the core values and the investment philosophy to where we are today.
Yeah, I think they're thrilled that they started something and the next generation took it to where they would hope it eventually became. So I they're tickled pink in terms of what's happened. So there's absolutely pride of ownership. So
what Jeannine just described, those foundational core values of do the right thing, represents something most firms talk about, but few actually operationalize. In my experience, the gap between stated values and lived culture is where most wealth management firms lose their competitive edge. But here's what's fascinating about KAR. They've managed to maintain cultural consistency across 4 decades and through explosive growth. When Jeannine mentions they still have clients from those early $40 million days, that's not just a nice story. It's proof of something most firms struggle to achieve: the ability to scale without losing the essence of what made them successful. Most firms face a choice as they grow: maintain boutique service quality or achieve scale. KAR has somehow avoided this trade-off entirely. When I pressed Steve about their extraordinary growth trajectory, $10 billion to $64 billion in just a decade, I expected to hear about some sophisticated business strategy or market timing, but what I discovered was far more profound. They've simply refused to compromise on the fundamentals that many others abandon in the pursuit of growth. Here's Steve on how they've managed to be such an outlier.
So in looking at your history, I saw that the firm hit the $10 billion AUM marker in 2015. So from 2015 to 2025, in the last decade, you've grown from 10 to 64 billion. So that's remarkable. If we just look at that period of time, the last decade, talk me through some of the big sort of inflection points. How would you tell that growth story to someone?
Well, we get this question all the time because it's certainly in our industry where there's a lot of, our counterparts that have really struggled to grow. We've been really an outlier. And, the question gets around what was the secret sauce or the magic bullet or whatever it is. And that's not there's a lot of factors that come into that. But, part of it has to do with, by 2015, we had been we were a 30-year-old firm, mm-hmm. and we were here. We were permanent. We, we just applied our trade. We stayed to our core competencies. We delivered both investment returns and a great client experience. And there's a lot to be said about just, putting one foot ahead of each other each day and executing. And sooner or later, the market recognizes that. Mm-hmm. And to a large degree, I think that's what it is. Now, I think there's things that have happened in our industry, both on the wealth advisory side and on the investment management side, that kind of shifted to our benefit. Okay. On the investment management side, I think that there was, especially in the institutional marketplace, there was a shift by investors to either index areas of the market they felt were efficient, but look for managers that were alpha generators in areas that they were less efficient. And that's a space that we always were in. Mm-hmm. And so I think there was a demand for what we were doing, and that was recognized maybe post GFC. Mm-hmm. And I think in the wealth advisory space, we spent a lot of time in terms of evolving our offering and expanding our services and resourcing with the right people in critical areas that really continue to hopefully kept us in the forefront in terms of what wealth advisory firms were doing. And again, I think it's, execution, exceeding expectations. And, I'd hate to start a new firm today because there's firms like us that have been doing this for 3 and 4 decades. Mm-hmm. And you just see, the brand gets recognized. So
mm-hmm. just to put a point on that, you mean it's that you haven't acquired any businesses
Correct.
to get from the 10 billion in 2015 to the 64 billion today. It's all been grown
it's
here.
It's all organic growth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think when we think of growth, just to echo what Steve said, And let's make sure we have the right products that the clients want, and make sure we're generating alpha there and offering the platform, as Steve said, of what the clients are looking for. And let's make sure we take exceptional, outstanding care of our clients. And let's make sure we have the right people to do the first two things. And that's really what we're focused on. And let's really execute and focus on the things we can control versus the things we can't control. And if we do all of that stuff, we're hoping that we see the results of that. And I think we've been fortunate enough to have seen growth come out of that.
Yeah, if I can add a couple more things, two things. One is our business has gone global. So we're an established brand in the U.S., but we're an emerging brand outside the U.S. And so that's been a big change for us over the last 10 years, is that we've seen a significant amount of growth outside the U.S. And then I think number two is that in the wealth advisory business, a lot of our counterparts and people who have started firms have come from a career that maybe started in insurance or planning or tax. They're not investment people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the value proposition is to be excellent in those services. And we have a world-class planning team at Kayne. But when it gets to the pool of capital that needs to be managed in a way to meet the plan, because they're not investment professionals, a lot of times the offering set is to index all your investments,
Right.
That it's a commodity. So let's make it as less expensive as possible, least expensive as possible. Well, our clients, there's a big market, and for people who view that is not satisfactory. They're looking for an advisor that has an investment management background, that has a point of view of what's happening in a global economy, has a point of view of what's happening in the capital markets, and can express that view in a very bespoke way to our clients and offer them interesting investment options that hopefully are a bit more sophisticated than what they receive from a lot of people in our industry. And so I think that gets recognized over time too. Here's some smart people. They have a point of view. They understand what I'm looking for. They're creating something for me in a customized way. And that's a very different model than how a lot of firms in our business operate.
What Steve just described reveals the fundamental misunderstanding most wealth management firms have about differentiation. While the industry has largely commoditized investment management, telling clients to index everything and focus on planning, KAR has doubled down on the very thing everyone else is abandoning. This is counterintuitive strategy at its finest. In a market where most advisors treat investment management as a necessary evil or a loss leader, KAR has made sophisticated, customized investment solutions their primary differentiator. They're not just claiming investment expertise, they're proving it through institutional quality research and bespoke portfolio construction that most clients find they simply can't get elsewhere. But here's what separates good investment management from extraordinary client relationships: the depth of care that extends far beyond portfolio performance. What you're about to hear illustrates something I rarely see in this industry. Advisors who have genuinely become integral parts of their clients' lives, not just their financial lives. This isn't about being friendly or responsive. This is about the kind of relationship depth that creates genuine loyalty and drives sustainable organic growth. Here's what that actually looks like.
Well, we have some really outstanding senior wealth advisors that really excel at that, and they they just understand. They're it's interesting. They really just truly enjoy developing a client relationship, which is beyond just the financial transaction, right? It's an interest in what's happening with them, what's happening with the family, what their concerns are, and they go beyond being trusted advisors. They become very close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeannine and I can tell you story after story after story of things that we hear from our senior wealth advisors and wealth advisors in terms of the impact they have on the clients' lives. I'm just thinking of one that's happened more recently where we had, a client pass away and how our senior wealth advisor, worked with the widow in a really very difficult period of time in her life, difficult family dynamic situation, and how she just had leans on him so significantly to help her through this process. And it's just not about thinking about what's happening financially. It's just supporting her in a really difficult time of her life. And we've got many, many stories like that.
I mean, in just that story, the advisor was invited at the celebration of life to get up and speak.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you the depth of the relationship. And the word that comes to mind all the time is care. They care.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you'd add to that? Or?
No, I mean, I think one of the things we get over when you've been in business for 40 years is you get a certain, confidence and conviction in the things that you do and how you do them and how it resonates with clients and with each other. I think we've all been at the business long enough to know not everything goes great. The markets go up and down, but you gain confidence through those experiences and conviction in how you handle things. And I think that comes through in a lot of the decision making. And that benefits our clients at the end of the day.
The relationship depth you just heard, advisors speaking at clients' funerals, becoming integral parts of family dynamics, doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of hiring advisors who possess a rare combination of technical expertise and genuine empathy. But here's the challenge every growing firm faces. How do you scale this kind of talent without diluting what makes it special? Most firms facing explosive growth make the same mistake. They hire fast to meet demand, then wonder why their culture deteriorates and client satisfaction drops. The industry's conventional wisdom says you can't afford to leave positions empty when revenue is on the line. KAR took the opposite approach, and what you're about to hear represents one of the most contrarian hiring philosophies I've encountered in wealth management. While their competitors were staffing up quickly to capture market opportunity, KAR was making a bet that patience in talent acquisition would compound into sustainable competitive advantage. This decision required enormous discipline and enormous confidence in their existing team's ability to absorb additional workload. But as you'll hear, this approach became the foundation for maintaining their culture while scaling from $10 billion to $64 billion. Here's how they did it.
I know that you have such an intentional focus around people development and hiring. I think in one of the conversations that you and I have had in the past, Jeannine, you told me that sometimes it can take a year.
Yes.
I think you told me one time it took you 2 years to fill a role. But when you're growing at the pace that you're growing, I'm a small business owner, small business in contrast to Kayne Anderson Rudnick. And you get this sense of like, I have to. There's the need. Yeah. So how do you work through that with a business that's growing so rapidly, but maintaining that like really intentional and disciplined focus on your culture, which is driven by your people?
It's a balancing act, but we do not wish to compromise when it comes to talent. So if at times where we did go through the growing pains, as I mentioned, what we ended up doing in those situations is really bring in temporary consulting help to take maybe some of the workload of more the admin workload, or what are items that an individual is doing that is not as high a value potentially, that we can have some outside consulting temporary help come in until we find the right individual. So I think we use that strategy quite a bit, and we certainly looked around the firm, and if there was certainly any functional area where there was any capacity, we utilized that. But bringing in temporary help to relieve the pressure, I think helps even with the hiring manager not feeling desperate enough to just hire anybody that's coming in through the door. So it really takes that pressure off to go back to let's not compromise and bring in the right talent that will deliver on behalf of the clients, believes in our core values, and is a good cultural fit.
Okay.
I mean, I think I would also add, like, we're a roll up your sleeves kind of culture too. We're not, just stay in your lane kind of workers. I think that's one of the things culturally we look for is people who will roll up their sleeves and get work done. And I think everyone's done that around here.
And we tell people that you can look at your job description, and I guarantee within 2 weeks you're going to be doing something outside the job description. And so if you can't deal in that environment, this is not the right place for you. I think that the demands on the operational side to scale on the business taught us lessons about having to be really picky with your talent acquisition and work really hard on talent retention. And I remember Jeannine one day walking in my office and just saying, "That's it. A's only going forward. A's only going forward. I don't care how long it takes to find people." And look, we had conversation today on potential hires, and it's tough because sometimes you feel the pressure of a need to have a person in a role because there's the demand to have that person in the role, and you just have that gut feeling that the person you spoke to, despite really liking the person, is not the right fit.
Right.
And it's just we've learned over and over and over again that you'll find the right person at some point. And so it's really hard to get, we're really picky here. But it turns out that we have a core group of really outstanding people who like to work together, that shared values, shared culture, and it makes it so much easier to operate when you've got that core group of people. So,
and I think it really becomes everything is easier when the times are good, obviously.
Of course.
But when you have a challenge, that's when the true colors come out, right? And I think that is when, at least I'm most proud of our team, because it is on whatever the challenge is, when challenges occur, that's when, as Steph said, people roll up their sleeves, come in, and how can we help? And the way the team comes together to address whatever it is, growing pain, whatever the challenge is, that are, for us, I think those are our most proudest moments of the team.
The A's only philosophy you just heard represents the ultimate contrarian strategy in today's talent-hungry market. While most firms facing explosive growth compromise on hiring standards to fill urgent needs, KAR proved that patience in talent acquisition can become a sustainable competitive advantage. But here's what most firms miss about culture. It's not what you write on the wall or put in your employee handbook. It's what happens when no one is watching. In my work with hundreds of wealth management firms, I've seen countless companies with beautiful mission statements and well-articulated values that completely fall apart in execution. Having the privilege of working closely with KAR and speaking directly with their clients, I can attest to something remarkable. There's complete alignment between what they say their culture is and how it actually shows up in client relationships. Their clients describe KAR advisors using the exact same language employees use to describe company culture. That's not accident, that's intentional design at the highest level. Most firms struggle to maintain culture during rapid growth because they treat it as something separate from business operations. KAR has made culture execution their primary business strategy. Here's how they actually make it work.
I wanted to read a quote from from your clients, because I think it does a really good job of it's best to hear it in the words of the client, right? So, someone said, we weren't looking for a relationship manager. We were looking for an active advisor that delivers high value, and we got it. They anticipate concerns. They're in front of problems, give good news, bad news, and present things that maybe I hadn't thought of. I believe they know me deeply. They understand my needs. They add value. Their personal relationship, personal interest in me has been wonderful. My advisors far exceeded my expectations. They're so responsive. They have so much talent. They continue to prove themselves to me. They take my financial needs to a much higher level. I can't ever recall asking a question that they didn't answer or give me what I needed. And if they didn't know it, they'd find it. How do you plan to maintain that culture and the special nature of the Kayne Anderson Rudnick business as the business grows and evolves?
hiring advisors nationally that continue to do what they're doing, care about the clients, and are delivering.
We work really hard on, again, it gets back to really being picky at the point of talent acquisition. You never really know what you get until you get someone in the organization. We work very hard on reinforcing the messaging of what's important from a cultural standpoint. Here, as you're well aware, we do a semi-annual all hands on deck meeting where we communicate what our strategic plans are, where we are as the year goes on, what's going on with our business, good or bad, where we're going to continue to place emphasis for the remainder of the year, celebrate the new people that we bring into the organization. And it just gives us an opportunity to remind people what's the core values and what's important here. We also try to develop ways in which people are providing or adding value to the organization beyond just simply their functional job description. And so as we have projects in the organization, we try to put together groups of people that will work on that project together and that might not necessarily interact day to day with each other, and allows people to get to know each other that they might not otherwise know. They feel that they're being given responsibility, so there's career path progression for them. They know they're being evaluated beyond just what they're doing with their specific role. And so all this builds towards hopefully a place where it's just not a place for employment, it's a place for a career. And so, we grind on that. We really work hard on that. Steph and her team do all sorts of internal events here to celebrate holidays and things like that here that bring people together in a way where they can be a bit social with each other. So this is all about, it's all about, talent retention. And again, I'll just say it again, that we work really hard to try to make this a place for a career. And so hopefully that just, by osmosis, just continues to get dripped in. And when you're here long enough, you realize, well, these people seem really serious about this. I might as well buy in, or I'm not going to be here, And if someone doesn't buy in, I think over the years we've learned that if a person's not who you think they were at the point of coming on board, then we have to make the hard decisions from time to time to have them exit out of the organization. Sometimes they figure it out themselves and they self-select out.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just to Steve's point real quick, I think culture is one of those things that's demonstrated. It's not just things that are recited. And so when you live it, you just kind of start embodying it. And I think that's how it perseveres. And that's how I think people, that's how you sustain it over time, is because people live it. And it's also, you watch it, you watch it in your leadership. It's like if you have a family event, or they encourage you, or if you want to try something new, they encourage you, so I think there is this lived component of our culture that makes it very real and authentic, and that's what makes it sustainable over time. So CAR-U is where it's really peer-to-peer learning, where different departments in the organization, we bring all employees together, and different departments or different functions will present to the entire firm so people can learn what people do. I mean, we work side by side all the time, but it can be very siloed because we're so busy. But it's an opportunity to ask your peers and to learn from them. Like, what do you do on a daily basis? And how does that help our clients? And how does that interact with this department, et cetera? And it's been great. I mean, it's fun. It's interactive. All the employees get together. We have a little social after, but it's a great opportunity. And that's another culture reinforcing activity where we're supporting each other and also learning from each other.
What you've heard so far reveals the anatomy of authentic organic growth, foundational values that actually get lived, hiring discipline that prioritizes quality over speed, and relationship depth that creates genuine loyalty. These aren't revolutionary concepts, they're fundamental business principles that most firms abandon under pressure. But here's the strategic insight that separates KAR from their competitors. They've mastered the balance between honoring proven fundamentals and evolving with market demands. While many legacy firms get trapped in the way we've always done things, and newer firms chase every trend without foundation, KAR has found the narrow path between tradition and innovation. This balance becomes critical when you consider their next challenge. How do you communicate sophisticated investment capabilities and authentic relationship culture in an increasingly digital world? How do you maintain boutique intimacy while competing on a global stage? After the break, we'll explore how KAR has evolved their marketing approach to meet modern client expectations without losing the essence of what makes them distinctive. This is where their story becomes particularly relevant for firms struggling to grow in today's complex landscape.
Are you looking to supercharge the growth journey at your business? FICOM is ready to make it happen by serving as your embedded growth partner. Let us put our unmatched industry and growth marketing expertise to work for your business. Our strategy-first, multidisciplinary approach ensures your business goals stay at the forefront, so you're always aligning all your marketing activity around the growth you want to achieve. Visit us at ficompartners.com to find out more.
All right, welcome back. What we've explored so far, KAR's culture execution and relationship depth represents the foundation of their success. But here's the strategic challenge every excellent firm faces. How do you scale authentic relationships in an increasingly digital world? This is where many wealth management firms hit a wall. They've built their success on personal connections and referral-driven growth. But when they try to communicate their value proposition at scale, they default to generic industry messaging that strips away everything that made them distinctive in the first place. The wealth management industry has been notoriously slow to embrace sophisticated marketing, treating it either as an unnecessary expense or a compliance nightmare. But firms that figure out how to authentically communicate their culture and capabilities through modern channels gain an enormous competitive advantage. KAR faced this exact challenge. How do you tell a story of institutional quality investment management and boutique level relationships to global audiences without losing what makes you special? Here's Stephanie on how they've navigated this evolution.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be any more different today than when I started. I mean, I've been here 25 years, and I was here when we built our first website, and that was a big deal. It was just a floating brochure that we had out there, and now it's a tool for driving business. And so, we worked on collateral and we worked on our website. That was marketing. And I have this is going to date me, but I have this old comic, Dilbert comic in my office. And this one of the characters was like, I want to work in marketing because that's just liquor and guessing. And it's like, that was the reputation that marketing had. And now it's, we have data and analytics and so many tools. And, but I think there's some core elements of it that are still the same. I think being someone who's worked in data for a long time, I've always said that data is more of an art than a science. Mm-hmm. Data can provide you good information directionally, but also you got to look at just what's in front of your face and make some good decisions. And I think the combination of that is what makes marketing so effective nowadays. But it's really, the platforms, how many levers you can pull and to reach clients. And different audiences, meeting them wherever they are, social, podcast, video, website. I mean, we have so many different ways. And then content. I mean, we're here to educate and make people better investors, financially more savvy. And how can we do that? It's all through marketing. And so I just think it's, just become more sophisticated and hopefully more helpful to the end user because we're sharing our knowledge. So more and more tools and a lot more data to work with. But essentially the same thing at the end of the day. How do we represent our brand? How do we be as authentic as possible? How do we, just share those core values through a lot of different mediums? That's really the goal at the end of the day.
And I think that you have challenges and opportunities in your seat specifically because of the scope and scale and size of the business and the differentiated segments of the market that you serve. So sort of on the institutional investment management side and then on the wealth advisory business.
Yeah.
Very different types of clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a breadth of services that it's beyond what most typical marketing, departments in this space have to work through.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that when you're thinking about the strategy? How do you sort of look at it all, zoom out and look at it all, but then identify, here's where we're going to focus in each of these areas?
Yeah, I mean, both there is overlap. So, we are at our core, we're, as Steve was saying, we're investors. We have an investment expertise and sophistication. So there's overlap between both businesses there. But then there's nuances. Wealth advisory is much more about the individual and a broader set of information that they're interested in. Investment management is more product specific. And how do we explain how we think about the markets and how we think it's best that clients approach individual companies. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to demonstrate that we're smart and thoughtful people who put care into how we handle our clients. And so we just demonstrate that in just a different way, whether it be through, data or analytics charts, or whether that be through how we explain, children's education or estate planning or something of that nature. So it's, you're really talking about different topics, but you're approaching it in a similar fashion. And so, and then it's just learning about your audience. How do they want to get communicated to, And like I said, we have a lot of different platforms to do that now. Is it a short video clip that explains something very succinctly, or do you want to give them a 45-minute podcast where you can go into depth and explain that? When we originally started our podcast way back in the day, people didn't even know what podcast meant. We put a description, we had a definition of what podcast was. I always tell this story because I think it's a good demonstration of how, Steve and Jeannine function as our management team. But I'm a commuter and I started listening to podcasts back in the day. And I was like, this thing's great. I can start and stop it. It's informational while I'm sitting on the freeway. And I was like, this is a great way to convey our portfolio information, what's helping, what's hurting, et cetera. So I went into their office and I'm like, I want to do this thing called a podcast. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, we just record it. And they're like, okay, great. Why not? And so we walked over to the Apple store, bought a mic and a laptop and started it on GarageBand. But I think that's kind of part of our entrepreneurial roots. They're like, you got an idea, try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, great. But it was helpful for our institutional audience, but also helpful for our wealth advisory clients. So there's places where, there's crossover there. And then you can also take that message and nuance it in terms of how sophisticated you want to get in talking about a portfolio, or how you want to maybe just talk about general trends, et cetera. Right. So you can use similar formats and just, nuance the messaging depending on your audience.
What Stephanie just described, tailoring sophisticated messaging across institutional and wealth advisory segments globally, reveals a level of marketing sophistication that most wealth management firms simply don't achieve. But here's the strategic insight that separates effective marketing from expensive busy work. Marketing can only drive meaningful growth when it's integrated into executive-level strategic planning, not treated as a tactical afterthought. This is where most firms fall down. They hire marketing professionals, give them a budget, and expect results without ever including them in the conversations that matter: strategic planning, client experience design, and business development priorities. The result is marketing that looks professional but drives little actual business impact. KAR's approach is fundamentally different. When marketing leadership sits at the strategic planning table, when they understand not just what to communicate, but why it matters to the business, that's when marketing becomes a growth engine rather than a cost center. Here's how Steve and Jeannine actually make this integration work.
Well, that continues to evolve, and it seems like we're always in the weeds on that. But I think that what we try to do is set 5-year business plan,
Okay.
strategic plan, and
You reset it every year.
it reset every year. But we have a path that we're taking, and your marketing effort has to align with your business goals, right? So if our plan is to continue to grow globally, if our plan is to place emphasis on certain parts of our either product lineup or our wealth advisory services, there has to be just the flow through of marketing materials, content, and activities that support your strategic plan. And so that's how we think of it. We try to communicate to Steph what we're trying to accomplish and what we're placing emphasis on, and ask her to come back and come back with brilliant ideas in terms of what she can do for us in terms of to support those efforts. Do you want anything to that?
Yeah, and I think it's not just the marketing side. I mean, I think we try and have all the functional leaders at the table
Right.
helping us with the strategy
Right.
and getting their input, because they're going to be the ones executing it. So having the buy-in and a say in that, I think, is really important, so that that vision is executed across all functional areas, marketing being a very important component in that, because Steph just articulated all the reasons why, but you have to get your message out there.
Right.
And the message is delivered of what we're doing, how we're doing it, through the efforts of the marketing team.
Who are some of those other functional leaders that you pull into the 5-year planning process?
I mean, everything from the operation side of the business, a chief admin officer that needs to make sure if we're seeing the growth based on the efforts of the
Right.
teams are ready to expand on that, whether it's the technology leader at the firm, compliance, an important component, HR, if we're
Right.
there's a growth initiative. So we try and have those leaders at the table, but then also at least twice a year, we have a total firm update where we are communicating where we are on our goals for that specific year. But we also talk about the 5-year sort of themes of growth and what we're thinking of as we go into the future. So
What you just heard about KAR's strategic planning process reveals something critical. They've solved the collaboration challenge that confounds most leadership teams, but their approach to leadership structure is also unconventional. In my conversations with wealth management firms, I consistently see the same pattern: a charismatic founder or CEO with singular vision who drives all major decisions. It's the classic entrepreneurial model, and it often works until that leader becomes the bottleneck for every strategic decision, or until succession planning becomes a crisis. KAR has operated with something almost unheard of in our industry: a 3-person executive team with no CEO. This isn't a temporary structure or a transition phase. It's been their deliberate approach for decades. Most leadership experts would tell you this is a recipe for gridlock, conflicting priorities, and decision paralysis. Yet somehow this collaborative leadership model has guided KAR through 40 years of growth, including their explosive expansion over the last decade. This question isn't just how the structure works. It's why so few firms have the discipline and mutual respect necessary to make it successful. Here's Steve on how they actually make decisions.
So there's always been an executive team at CAR. There's never been a CEO. And it's an unusual structure in our industry. And it really comes from the start of the 3 founding partners. And so Jeannine and I just always grew up. That was the model, so what you didn't know what you didn't know. Right. And so there's always been a 3-member team.
Okay.
And so Craig Stone is the additional member. Craig's our chief investment officer. The CIO has always been a member of the executive team. And So we grew up observing how it worked.
Did the
And
three founders function in a similar way that the three of them were the executive team?
yes.
Okay.
So John, Rick, and Alan were the original executive team. And it's changed as people have left the organization. And it works for us. But it works for us because there's one respect. We like each other. We respect each other. We can disagree and occasionally not like what the other person's saying, but we work through it. And there's got to be, just a enjoyment of working with the other two people and a lot of respect between the three. We all have our lanes of, kind of what we focus on day in, day out, but strategic planning is amongst the three of us. Major decisions are amongst the three of us. And it works for us, and I really wouldn't have any other way.
At the end of the day, we end up making better decisions because we have we have each other as sounding boards, right? So, as Steve said, we might not necessarily agree each time on everything, but I think by challenging each other, I think we each end up making a better decision because now we've had the viewpoint from different sides of the business, something I might not have thought about if I'm dealing with an issue or strategic goal that we're working on. So having two other people as a sounding board, I think helps us make better decisions on behalf of our clients.
So what's next for Kayne Anderson Rudnick? What are the growth strategies they are looking to next? How do they carry a 40-year legacy into the next decade?
I'm really excited about the growth opportunity and the focus we have on the wealth advisory side of the equation. As you mentioned earlier, we have seen significant growth over the last 10 years, all organic, and our focus is to continue to do that and accelerate that growth. So I'm excited about bringing in additional talent and advisors out there and to be able to service more clients as we have been servicing our existing clients. So pretty exciting.
Thank you.
I mean, from a marketing perspective, we're here to support those growth initiatives, and figuring out the best ways to do that is, both exciting and just full of opportunity because there are so many different ways in which we can do that. And so continuing to explore, how to grow the business out, in the channels that Steve was talking about, and, how do we meet the client where they're at, and how do we give them the information to let them know who we are, what we represent, and how we can help them with their finances. So, I think that's where we're going to be focused.
Thank you.
Wealth advisory, given the quality of the people that we have and the services that we provide, we can easily be 2 or 3 times the size that we are. And the goal is to grow that business thoughtfully, and continue to deliver, above our client expectations. And that's really what we spent the last year planning for. And so we're excited about the execution of that. I think that, the executive committee here continues to, think about where do we need to be 3 to 5 years down the road to remain competitive and relevant in this industry. We had a meeting a little bit earlier today that this topic came up is, we're pleased with where we are today, but, where are the pressures in our business? Where are the opportunities in our business? And are we making sure that we have to make a decision as it relates to where we need to be 3 to 5 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And if that means adding resources and placing an investment into the business in order to do that, let's make sure that we've collected all the information we need to make a great decision, but let's not be afraid to go ahead and do that. So I think both areas of our business have great opportunities. They're different types of opportunities. One more globally, one more just simply focused on how we can execute here on a wealth advisory business. But, growth is important from a standpoint of, employee retention and providing individuals a way to have career progression. And so growth just for growth purposes or financial purposes, doesn't make sense to us. It's how do we grow in a way that eventually Jeannine and I are going to ride off into the sunset, and how do we have the next generation take over for us and perpetuate what John and Rick and Alan started, and we are able to oversee for a period of time and hand it off to the next generation. And that's what it's all about.
What you just heard from Steve, the vision of thoughtful growth and deliberate succession planning, captures something profound about KAR's approach to success. While most firms optimize for quarterly results or exit strategies, KAR is building for generational impact. This conversation reveals a blueprint that directly challenges many assumptions our industry makes about modern growth. We've been told that organic growth at scale is impossible, that culture can't survive rapid expansion, that sophisticated investment management can't coexist with intimate client relationships, and that collaborative leadership creates decision paralysis. Kayne Anderson Rudnick has systematically proven each of these assumptions wrong. Their 540% overall growth over the past decade isn't just impressive, it's a data point that should force every wealth management firm to rethink their own growth strategies. But here's the deeper insight. KAR's success isn't about tactics or timing. It's about the discipline to make harder choices consistently over decades. Choosing patience over urgency in hiring, choosing depth over breadth in client relationships, choosing collaborative decision-making over autocratic efficiency, choosing organic growth over acquisition shortcuts. These choices compound, and in an industry increasingly dominated by private equity roll-ups and commoditized service models, firms like KAR represent something our industry desperately needs: proof that authentic, sustainable growth is not only possible, it's more profitable and more fulfilling than the alternatives. The question isn't whether other firms can replicate Kayne Anderson Rudnick's results. The question is whether they have the discipline to make the choices that create them. I'd love to hear what resonated with you the most about today's episode, or what questions you have, or areas you'd like me to double down on. I hope you'll take a minute to find me on LinkedIn and connect directly. Or I invite you to please leave us a review. Ratings and reviews are always appreciated. At FICOM Partners, we're on a mission to help advisory firms achieve the growth you're capable of. We serve as your outsourced chief marketing officer and marketing department, driving marketing-enabled organic growth through strategy, execution, and advisor coaching. For more valuable growth resources, I invite you to visit ficompartners.com/insights. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube so that you can continue learning from inspiring growth journeys. I'd like to thank today's guests, our producers at Podpony, production assistant Molly Spina, and my amazing executive assistant, Kristen George. This is Meg Carpenter, CEO and co-founder at FICOM Partners and your host of Growth Leaders of Wealth Management.